Hello! And here we are at the end of the year. Christmas is beckoning. We are recording our last episode of the year. And we've got an old friend back, suitably dressed for Christmas.
Yes.
In a bright red shirt.
Thank you, George.
Welcome back, Msoni.
It's lovely to be back. Nice to see you again.
No, he's saying you look like a Christmas tree.
That's not what he said.
That's not what he's saying.
I believe George has the ability to make his own words.
Thank you. Anyway, so here we are. We're going to be doing a special episode reviewing the good, the bad, and the ugly of 2021, and looking out a little bit into 2022 and what our expectations, our hopes, and our fears are for the year ahead. But before we get into that, what are we partaking of? Unfortunately, we must ask you in your pajamas.
Well, I think it's the same rooibos. It's got masala and chai spices, so that's what I'm partaking, and I quite like it. It's got a certain feel, and I quite like it.
There are no adjectives for this, are they?
Yeah, no, I think it's okay. I've just been introduced to it. You introduced this to me, and I quite like it.
Yeah,
I think the masala is silent. It's subtle, and I quite like that. So I don't like rooibos ordinarily because I find it very dominating and overbearing. So I think mixing it with the other spices actually just tones it down, and it's got the right combination that I'm thoroughly enjoying. Actually,
You realize
I've had a full teapot, thanks to you, George. So it must be good.
So, George, I've had to listen to him talk about this twice, and I must say I'm really impressed with myself for not falling asleep.
Yeah, I have no idea what he said.
But I'll tell you something.
I was more interested in asking him if he was wearing socks. Are you wearing socks?
Yeah, yes, I am.
And you're wearing a full suit.
Yeah, I had a very important meeting, end of year meeting.
So you wore pajamas?
If I tell you the correct word, you just wouldn't understand. But
No, I
that's
wouldn't.
perfectly fine. Yeah, I had a great meeting, great end of year, and I'm looking forward to 2022. You know what they say about optimism, right? That be very optimistic about your own personal circumstances and be very pessimistic about the world.
I like that.
I'd like to say something though, because when you said masala, kind of reminded me of living in India. This tea is available off the streets, as you may be aware, on a 24/7 basis.
Right.
Next to the
Well,
elephants
I doubt they have rooibos in India.
No, but they would have masala.
You mix masala
and
with
certainly,
any type of tea.
And certainly they have this particular one called garam masala. Very hot masala. So you've got the
the one
temperature,
time,
and then you've got
I should tell you
Sorry,
a
what
very
are you
interesting
having?
story.
Okay,
I
you
should
guys
tell
are going down a rabbit hole before the show even starts.
No, you will love this
It's
story.
the year
You will love
end.
this story.
Yeah.
So he invited me once in India, and I went, and we had a great time. And he introduced me to Indian food.
And you're very light skinned, so I can picture how the story ended.
It ended very badly the next day.
The color of his skin.
It ended very badly the next day.
Look, I think it's fair to say he had to stay close to his hotel. He couldn't make it to the Taj Mahal.
Anyway, Musori, what are you drinking?
I'm drinking Lafroig because it's the end of the year. And just like most people that consider themselves in power, I tend to drink in the last 6 months of the year.
But you're a quicker boy, aren't you?
Yes, I am. That too.
Yeah, well, I will have to tell our audience that he doesn't exercise that kind of 6 month a year discipline.
Discretion.
I think we were doing that earlier in the show, and we've decided to slow down a little bit and go local as Laika. So apparently Zambezi has this limited edition that they call the Zambezian, which George insists is no different from the normal Zambezi. I don't believe you.
It's no different. I think I've had Okay, I won't say how many I've had. Because I've had quite a few of these limited edition ones. And yeah, it's a genuine article.
So why would they call them limited edition ones? Because the branding and the coloring is different.
Okay, well, maybe our friend Patricia Mrambinda might care to comment on one of our social media pages, or someone from Delta, and tell us what's the difference. But certainly, from my point of view, it tastes exactly the same. He thinks...
Well, I'm not really as...
I'd recommend you also ask Stan to comment, because he was quite generous with marketing Zambezi.
Stan?
We'll change.
Okay. Stan, be sure to make a comment. And anyway, here we find ourselves reviewing the year. The good, the bad, the ugly. The macroeconomics. 2021, good year in terms of economic growth, GDP growth. There's been a lot of talk about bumper harvest. I think certainly you got strong views about it. We've seen big numbers coming out of some of the listed companies, Rufaro. Big numbers coming out of the Diaspora, Remittances, aid. What do we make of it? Maybe we'll just go around the table.
Well, if we're going to be optimistic...
We're not going to start with him, because then he's
we'll all
going
be
to
depressed.
Yes, he's the only one who's going to talk. So, yes. Tell us about the stock market and the capital markets. What have we seen?
So the stock market's up. Year to date, more than 200% in real terms, which is amazing given that on the ground, the companies themselves, in terms of the earnings, in terms of the volumes, the numbers actually don't justify that performance. So in my mind, the performance of the ZSE is really an indicator of money supply growth, of future inflation, of people trying to ring fence their Zim dollar positions against future inflation. So those numbers should be taken with trepidation and a bucket of salt in terms of...
Bucket.
Yeah.
Yes, oh yeah, a bucket.
Is that sufficient?
And a drop of water. Because sadly, this is the nature of the beast, where the earnings, the outlook doesn't justify the valuations. But, you know, our capital...
Okay, valuations. What are we talking about? What's the market cap?
So it's not...
As we go into Christmas.
It's come off a lot. You know, 3-4 weeks ago, it was more than 8 billion. It's come off to 6.6 billion.
At what rate?
200.
And at 220, 230?
Okay, so it comes down 5 or 4.5.
Four,
what was it in the past?
The previous year?
So a month ago, it was more than 8 billion. At the beginning of the year, it was less than 5 billion. So
no, at the beginning of the year, it was closer to about 1.7, 1.8 billion.
I wouldn't say...
Okay.
No.
All right. Well, okay. Let's say about 2012. What was it?
Yeah, 2012, it was about 5.5 billion.
So it's back to those levels now as we close the year.
Yeah, but...
it's speaking more to what he's saying, more preservation of value. So less about the earnings sustaining the market cap,
absolutely,
but preservation of value, because there's just so much Zim dollar in the economy, and people are looking at...
This is back! Anyway, carry on.
Extraordinary.
yeah.
This is life in Zimbabwe. We get excited when mundane things like the power coming back happen.
Wow. Anyway, ignore this guy. Well, we can't. He's got the floor, but you're commenting.
No, continue.
So yeah, from a market perspective, I wouldn't read too much into that. Looking into 2022, into next year, I think that it just speaks to a sad state of affairs in terms of where people who have excess liquidity, their options, particularly if they're in a position where they can only do legal things, because there's a whole universe of Zimbabweans that don't have that restriction and will just participate on the power market and buy currency and keep it in, as Tinashe coined the expression, the national mattress bank, right? So I think that what's happened on the ZSE from a valuation perspective is actually an indicator of where the currency is going.
So you think it's going to go some more? Okay, we're going to come back to that. We're still looking at the year in review. Productivity, production, 2.7 million tons of grain. Did it come in?
No, it didn't.
How much do you think we got?
Just to give you a number would be unfair without giving you context. What we do have is 800.
I think
We've
got
got
these guys
800.
drink tea.
Yeah. No, we've got 800. That went
800.
in 800.
That's a third.
Yes. But here's the good thing. That's the first time that's ever happened in 22 years. We've never had any excess grain.
Since land reform.
Since land reform. Well, I wouldn't say since land reform. Let's say since the turn of the century.
Land reform.
2018 was actually a good year.
It was okay. But for the first time this year, we actually had a surplus of 800,000 metric tons.
No. Surplus or we
Surplus.
got 800?
No. Surplus is what we have right now in GMB as stock in the event that we're in a drought. We're going to go through that 800 tons before we go to Ukraine.
So how much came in?
What would have come in is in the order of 1.5 million.
Okay. So
But there's
more
also
than half what
yes,
people got.
but then there's also a good chunk of that which did not come into GMB, which a lot of families kept out there as personal family savings.
So how much do you think came in?
1.5 includes the total. That's the sum.
So you think we produced 1.5?
we produced 1.5?
Well,
I can see you cringing, and
Oh, no,
every
no,
bone
no.
about your body
but-
wants to react.
I'd like to put in
No,
a few
no.
comments because I had the opportunity this year to be involved more intimately in grain, and
I was concerned when you use those words. More intimately involved.
Ignore him. Ignore him.
I
So,
think
yes,
Rivaro,
okay,
what we're
let's-
talking about is production
Okay.
Oh, okay.
and productivity.
Okay. Let's stick to the 1.5 million tons of grain. Okay.
And a lot of this has come off the new program Fumvudza or Intwasa. What it's done is it's given everybody right from the very top to the bottom an opportunity. An opportunity to participate in production, an opportunity to produce a staple, an opportunity to keep what they couldn't have done before.
Are you campaigning for a place on the PAC?
No, I'd love to be on the PAC, purely because I could take your agenda, George, to the PAC.
I have an idea. Okay, anyway, carry on.
But what's clear is that as a
What is the
country,
PAC, by the way?
Carry on.
our country is moving forward. It's not as fast as we would like it to be, but at this pace, there's a realistic chance that beyond 2030 and near to 2030, we will see a middle income country.
Oh my gosh.
Now, I'm not talking politics, and I'm just talking as I'm talking as a practitioner who got invited into something, and I've had the chance to go deep
Into the numbers.
but also into the country. Rufar, you can't say anything at this point.
No, let Tinashe do it.
So you reckon,
I'm sure
you reckon
Tinashe's got
productivity's
some,
up?
he's got some opinions.
It's definitely up on an agro scale. The issue is that we didn't know how deep we were in the hole. This is the first time we've had anything in GMB in 20 years.
But do you believe in GMB? Should
Okay.
we have...
Well, anyway, okay.
That's a separate discussion.
Let's let Tinashe have a go.
I don't believe in GMB. I
Yes,
think
yes,
you
I
should be
agree with
GMB.
George.
Children,
Let's
children.
have Tinashe
have a go.
Yes,
Okay.
please.
The foreign sector. Remittances, diaspora, aid.
No, but before you go there, respond to this man, please.
Who's asking the questions here?
All right. Okay. So before I even answer any of your questions, I've got a more interesting suggestion.
Producer, I resign.
Okay.
From 1st of January, of
but
course.
I'll capture everything that everybody is saying in a year. But I need to make a caveat, and a very strong one for everybody. Anyone who understands me is actually, I give less of my opinion. And I
is there a
give
universe
more-
of people who understand you?
What?
Because I've
There
been your
is,
mate for
there is.
minutes.
We all do. We all do.
He's due for a bathroom break, so
Yeah,
you better go
exactly,
quickly
but-
before we have a problem on stage.
Yeah, but you gave everybody a chance to speak, right? And we let him speak. And
For
he was
all
really-
of 2 minutes. For all of 2 minutes.
and the numbers that he was saying, I mean, you know, so why I wanted to make it very clear is I actually have less of an opinion, and all I do is interpret the data. So whatever I write, whatever I say, I always go back to what does the data say. And if the data says one thing, that is exactly the narrative I will take. If you want to know my personal views,
can you answer the
quite
question?
different. I know you can't tell me what to do.
Yes, I can. Yes, I can. Can you answer the question?
So that is very important.
Guy called
especially-
Rango runs the show. He can cut you off.
Okay, so now we know what's in the limited edition or the Zambezia. So if we say, has it been a good year or a bad year, right? So the first thing that we need to be very clear about is that we'll only know the actual numbers. We'll probably know them second quarter of 2022. So usually when you read the World Bank reports, Zimstats is usually the third quarter of 2022.
Surprise, surprise, you're being pedantic. But anyway, carry on.
Yeah, well, I want people to contextualize. So when you hear 7.8, 3.5, these are all estimates. And they will remain estimates until we get the
You
actual
realize
numbers.
my question was on the external sector.
We'll get the actual numbers in the second quarter of next year. I tend to believe the World Bank numbers rather than the Ministry of Finance numbers. And there's usually a good way.
Because you're racist, right?
Not that. But you
Can we just
eventually tend to
be
find
done with
that
it so we can move on?
Zimstats numbers tend to actually be more aligned with the World Bank numbers. So we only got 2020 numbers in the third quarter. Zimstats only produced the 2020 numbers in the third quarter of this year. So the actual numbers, we'll start getting them in the second quarter. So having given you that context, and I've colored it, I think, appropriately if we're looking at the good, the bad, and the ugly. Going back to answer you now specifically what Musoni has said.
Finally.
No, I asked you on the external sector.
I think when you look at what Musoni has said, what we now know as of end of November is 1.2 million grain was delivered at GMB, but of that 1.2
Maize.
No, of maize is just 1 million.
Okay.
So the other 200,000 is grain. But this is now the tail end. What we're expecting, which actually was anticipated at the beginning, is eventually, I think, in terms of maize, we'll probably get to 1.2. And everything else that stays in the granaries and for own consumption, we'll probably take that number to around 1.6 at most, 1.7 if you want to really stretch it. Which, to what Musoni is saying, is actually true. That if we get to 1.7, unfortunately, it's below what we require in terms of consumption. So it's below the 2 million metric tons that we need for our personal consumption. But it's way higher than it was in previous years. And unfortunately, it's lower than the 2.7 that we're expecting. And I think this is the problem that we have in Zimbabwe, is that if the ministry had just stuck to its guns, to its original estimate, which was actually 1.4. That's what they were expecting. And they were expecting 1.4, and then they would have delivered 1.7. We would have correctly contextualized it that it was a good year. It was still less than the 2 million, but it's still a good year. But it's nowhere near.
So does that make
the
it a bad year?
2.7.
Wait, so are you saying it was a bad year?
Thank you.
No,
Can he now answer the question?
no,
The external sector.
I'm answering.
No, can you-
I'm
can you-
answering Musoni,
no, can-
and I will
the-
eventually come to you.
No, the question was, can you comment on the external sector?
Yes, I will eventually come to you.
No, eventually
can you answer?
we're all going to be dead.
Can you comment on the external
That's right,
sector?
Rufaro, tell him.
Okay. Right.
In terms of the external sector, the most important thing that you need to know is our trade statistics. So our trade statistics, we exported 5.7 and we imported 5.7. So we have a trade balance. But what we do have a trade balance, and then we have an extra, and this year was particularly good because we had SDRs of close to $1 billion. We had Western aid close to 850 million. And then we had Diaspora remittances about 1.3, 1.4. That's actually expected. So you already
2.2 plus 8, so 3 billion.
about 3 point something.
So you're going to struggle with this
billion
question.
dollars.
Is that good or bad?
It's actually good. It's actually good. I don't know why you would have a problem with. It's actually good that we have.
So
all
it's been
this-
a good year.
No. You asked me.
Baro, thank you. Allow me to help him.
You know, you asked.
Can I
You
help
asked.
him, Daniel?
Are you asking? Are you asking about the year? Or are you asking about the stats? About the external stats?
The external sector.
And I'm saying the external sector is actually good. The external sector, but it doesn't mean that it's been a good year. Because what it means, remember, if the external sector is good, it actually means, in real terms, that we're no longer producing. We're not a productive economy anymore. We're now a consumptive economy that is actually supported by the external sector. So, and why would you have a problem with that? You would have a problem with that because it means that our dollar only gets into Zimbabwe and circulates in the tertiary sector,
Our
and
dollar?
it moves whatever US dollar is coming in.
Okay.
It's not going through the value chain of production. So ideally what you want is you want $1 to move around in Zimbabwe quite a bit before it goes out. But what's actually happening to us is our external sector is the one that's bringing in the dollar. So we are a consumptive economy in the sense that the dollar comes in and then we're consuming products from outside, so it goes back. And I think that that's the problem that we have.
And this is a good place for us to pause for a moment. Maybe get him to take a deep breath, have some more tea, spitting venom out from the blocks, but we'll be back.
Masala. No doubt.
Oh my gosh, yeah, that masala stuff.
We'll be back in a couple of minutes. Welcome back. I know you've got a lot to say, but we've got to move on. Turning to the blue glass building on Samora Machel. Monetary policy. Restrict your comments to monetary policy.
This year, it was a terrible year. I think when you look at money supply growth, in terms of reserve money, which is what they look at, already the latest numbers that we have up to September, it's been growing at around 110, 122% increase year on year.
Okay.
So up to September. And that's huge. In terms of Zim dollar, it's around 253%.
253%.
253%.
So
of
we're
the
3.5
local currency
times the money we had.
a year ago, up to September. So just the Zim dollars. When you look at the Zim dollars, when you consider the US dollar, it then comes down to around 150. So the overall money supply has actually grown by 150%, but specifically for Zim dollars, is actually grown by 253%. And it's driven by government borrowings and private sector credit that is actually increased. I think government borrowings has increased by 350 something percent, and private sector has also increased close to 300%. Private sector
Wait a minute. So
credit.
where's that? So the amount of Zim dollars in circulation has increased 250%.
Yeah.
But the government's borrowings and private sector borrowings have increased by 350%.
Yeah.
Where's this other 100% come from?
So so what's toning it down is the US dollars in the economy. So because we've got a fixed exchange rate over the year, we've actually been increasing the FCAs, the US dollar holdings in the economy. So you're saying that has only grown by about 130 something percent.
So basically, if you've got access to US dollars, you hold your US dollars and borrow
Zim dollars. That's what's been happening. That's
Okay.
the arbitrage that's been happening.
inflation.
It's been awful. Look, if you had $100 worth of Zim dollars this time last year, you've lost about 60% of your value.
You got 40 cents left.
Why would any reasonable individual, corporate institution store value in Zim dollars?
Well, and
Are
maybe
Zim
you want to
dollars
answer
a
that
store
question.
of value?
Why has anybody kept Zim dollars?
Are Zim dollars a store of value? Is there a school of thought that
Well,
they
that's
are?
the case that Treasury makes, and it's a sad case. And what's even more sad is that we live in a regulatory framework where a lot of the capital market players who manage pension funds. So if you have a regular job, which I think you do,
Most of the time.
when you're not farming and selling
Making-
tomatoes on the side of the road,
And hang out with you, idiots.
yeah, like you're probably contributing to a formally structured pension fund that by law has to allocate a significant portion of its capital to monetary assets, to prescribed assets like government treasury bills, which are guaranteed to lose value, right? So there's this wealth transfer happening at a macroeconomic level for every significant form of business that's running a pension fund, where they're just transferring wealth in real terms to government. And it's a silent tax, right? Because when you get your pay slip, you can see how much you're contributing to the state, and it's clear. But what inflation does, and this is what's really pernicious about monetary policy, is that it quietly transfers value from savers to the state. It's a silent tax. So they don't tell you upfront that this is what you're paying, but they just take it from you.
So is it surprising that our savings are negative at a macro level? This would make sense then, that our savings are negative.
No, it's not surprising at all. And I think that going into 2022, this is one of our challenges. That the market, economic players in this market have been traumatized over the last 30, 40 years. And they've, to the extent that they're not stupid, they've learned a bunch of things, right? Do not save in local currency is foremost of those lessons.
The government is not even using its local currency.
Okay, you guys are leading me down a rabbit hole. We're going to come back there, but exchange rate, auction.
The auction is another center of wealth transfer from the poor to the rich, from those who require to make foreign payments.
For those who generate currency.
Yes. And from those who have no idea what's happening, they don't understand why their money is losing value. It's happening at the auction. So the problem I have with the auction, and I have not participated in the auction ever, is, yes, I haven't, is because firstly,
What, on moral grounds? Or I thought you were a businessman.
I am a businessman. And
So why wouldn't you participate in the auction?
I've
He doesn't
taken...
have access.
Are you an importer? Maybe he's not an importer.
Anyway, yes, so
But I've understood that a lot of the nature of the opportunity that exists right now in this country will not be available in the event of a sudden shift of policy in what I would consider the right direction. So if you ask me what is my strategy in business right now, my strategy is what will happen in the event of a change in the auction system. And I think you're all expecting that change to happen at some point.
No. Why?
So when you
it's
turn
been 2 years.
60, so when you turn 60, the auction will be going.
Are you a student of history? Have you lived in this country over the last 50 years?
Yes, and nothing has ever lasted more than 5 to 10 years in this country.
I agree with Musoni.
Anyway,
It's
So our
inevitable.
strategy is actually beyond the auction.
That the
Anyway,
auction will fail
children.
is inevitable.
children, switch to fiscal policy. I'll come to you. Your mentor says there's a surplus.
He's not my mentor.
Come on, he's your mentor.
Are you denying?
He's your
He's my
mentor.
teacher.
Ashnakurongeka.
He's my teacher.
Are you denying your teachers? Are you 3 times before?
A useful anecdote. Do you know a useful anecdote? He's a great admirer of Joseph Schumpeter.
Creative destruction?
Well, he's one of those. But,
So this would obviously be a moment of destruction before
Joseph
creation.
Schumpeter owned a bank and was also the Minister of Finance of Austria.
And he failed at both things, by the way.
I will leave it
I'll-
there.
No, no, he
okay,
aspired
okay.
to 3 things. And he admits only to failing one. So we don't know
Okay,
which.
no, but
That's
that's another anecdote. But to take his analogy further, what Tinashe is saying in a very polite way is that Joseph Schumpeter, who created this phenomenal meme of creative destruction in economics, right? He failed miserably as a banker, and he also failed miserably as Minister of Finance.
No,
And that's what.
that's not what.
make his own point.
Yeah, that's not what I'm saying.
Okay.
Oh,
what
That's
are you
your
saying?
interpretation.
Despite
What
his
are you
pajamas, I
saying?
think he can.
Yeah.
He can make his own point.
I'm saying that Joseph Schumpeter realized, because remember, everything we understand about capitalism, everything we understand about markets actually came from Joseph Schumpeter.
I
And
don't
Joseph
know about
Schumpeter,
everything. I think you're giving him.
Okay, well, let him get it.
yeah, I think
carry on, carry on. Let's.
he realized by holding those positions of a bank in hyperinflation, to support his point of being Minister of Finance in hyperinflation, that he soon enough realized that that position is useless. You have no control whatsoever. It's the politicians who have control, not you. So I'm just saying that Mthuli, as a student of Joseph Schumpeter, is coming head to head with Joseph Schumpeter's realizations that he has no control whatsoever. So while he might sit there and have the greatest and noblest of actions, unfortunately, he has no
It's a
control.
fantastic insight.
Yeah, he has no control. And that's why when Joseph Schumpeter went to Harvard, because remember, this was in the mid-1930s, what then happened is he then moved, because they were Jewish, and Hitler was
They were being persecuted in that part of the world.
And then he moved. I thought he was interested in that.
Yes, I am,
anecdote.
and you should be.
In that anecdote.
I'm going to cut him off just now.
But when he moved to Harvard, there's an interesting bit, which I think you all love, is that in his first book, which he wrote when he was around 28, he had talked about economic development, and he had talked about man d'etat, what
Men of
it
action.
means, men of action.
Yeah.
And he had really been scathing
Man
to
with cart.
well, there you go. To the intellectuals. So he says the problem with the intellectuals is they have no
You need to make
action.
your point.
No, this is a lovely point. So the lovely point is this. When he moved to Harvard, he then took it's chapter 11. It's called chapter 11. He took that chapter out of his book. So in the subsequent writings, he took that out because now he was in esteemed corridors and he couldn't attack his colleagues, which were intellectuals. But a lot of what we learn about Joseph Schumpeter, and going back to the fiscal policy, is that what the minister says in that position, when you have hyperinflation, as you have correctly articulated, when you have exchange rate problems, is that he has very little control. So he tried his best in raising our taxes, thinking that he can close the gap, but there was a hole that was being made at the central bank somewhere else. He's tried to do a whole lot of things, but he actually doesn't have any leverage.
So there's a hole being made somewhere else. Social services. Social services are generally under budget.
They've always been under budget.
But
what
I
do
think
you make of that?
I think you're asking the wrong question. I think like you can go to Norway, Sweden, anywhere in Scandinavia or Western Europe.
My favorite
the
countries
US.
are Scandinavian.
Right?
We're not going there.
And we can have that conversation because even if it's dumb, they can afford it.
No.
Right? They have the money.
No, but
can I
you're
finish?
missing
Can I
you're missing
finish?
the point. The point is, we have a budget to spend X on social services.
He's a tyrant.
Yes, I am
No,
being
it's
a
not a
tyrant.
tyrant.
I am being a tyrant because the producer is going to fire me.
I'm going to use less flattering language for his behavior. But
Anyway,
anyway,
it should not be
I'm
on
not
the
yet
show.
there.
The producer is going to fire me if I'm not a tyrant. So we budgeted a certain amount of money for social services.
Right.
Health, for example, we've come in at 46% of the budget.
Yes.
What do you make of that?
I think that the government is saying that we're in a period of a pandemic. There are elements of consumption.
So we're underspending.
Hold on. So the elements of the budget which are sitting elsewhere. So there are pockets of that budget, the next 54% which is missing, which is probably sitting in military, defense, etc., relating to the budget.
Okay, so we're in
but
a health
having said
pandemic.
that, that's the first.
So
that's the first
we get
view.
we take the health money and we give it to the military.
Yes, they are also participating in this whole picture, because when you follow the full story about this pandemic, there is actually a very robust argument that this is also warfare.
Mafungira Are
you kidding?
Right. Look,
Maybe no more from the floor.
right? We've seen huge growth in infrastructure spending.
Yes, we have.
Roads,
Fantastic.
dams,
Yes, we have.
repeated recapitalization of JB. Okay, we'll put that aside. But
And we also want to recapitalize great adventures like Zimbabwe.
okay, let's put those aside. But let's look
What
at
about the
roads.
one going to space?
Let's look at roads
Oh, yeah,
and
we're sending a satellite.
Yeah.
let's look at roads and dams. We spend a lot of money on that. What do you make of that?
Look, I think that if we could afford it, if the money was free flowing, it would be fantastic to spend money on these things, right? But I look at it as a pathology, right? I look at it as a capital allocation problem, because we have an economy that is anemic, that is not thriving, that has got all sorts of structural issues, and it doesn't matter how much the government is spending on the right thing if it is punishing entrepreneurs, innovators, and economic growth to do it. It's actually, in the bigger scheme of things, doing more harm than good.
Okay. On that point, you might as well comment on suspension of dual listed counters, our attitude towards Old Mutual and Old Mutual ETF.
Oh, okay. My biggest challenge in having this conversation is to be polite.
Rufaro, you've never struggled with this sort of situation.
But look, you know what?
It must be George's fault.
I'm just going to call a spade and say, look, to the extent that the dual listing and fungibility of Old Mutual and PPC caused other unintended problems in our economy, I think the solution was not telling them we're suspending your listing and you can move to this other exchange. Right? This does not happen in free markets, which is why Old Mutual and PPC said they politely declined to move to the free fares. And I don't think they ever will, right? I think there's an expression about the path to hell being paved by good intentions. So however
Road
noble
to Petition by F.A. Hayek. Well done.
Yes.
So whatever
He reads a bit.
Yeah.
so whatever the noble intentions were, right? I think that they got it horribly wrong in terms of the execution, in terms of the action that they took. And we have not endeared ourselves to Old Mutual PPC, but more importantly, far more importantly, to global capital markets.
And maybe that's a good place to pause. We'll be back in a couple of minutes. So, rather a depressing review of 2022, but
2021, sir.
2021, thank you very much. But maybe a brief outlook to 2022. What do we hope to see? What do we think we'll probably see? And what do we fear we may see? Very quickly.
I'm an optimist. So I think that, one of the things that happened this week is that the British government, in its infinite wisdom, decided to reverse the city red list that they did for all these African states on review of the data. And what I hope will happen in terms of Zimbabwean government policy in 2022 is that they will be honest and they will review 2021, and they will look at what worked and what didn't work, and they will be progressive and choose more of what worked and dump more of what didn't work.
That's a hope. What do you think will probably happen?
Look, I think that there won't be as progressive policy as I would like, as I would hope. But I think that they're pragmatic. At a fundamental level, I think that our government, notwithstanding all their policy missteps and errors, interact with reality, and they will dump some of the things that haven't worked.
What do you fear is actually going to happen?
Oh, there's going to be a bunch of printing ahead of 2023, and inflation is going to run away.
What do you hope will happen?
What I hope will happen in 2022 going 2023 is a contraction of monetary supply growth. That's my hope. What do I expect? I expect there will be growth, but this growth will be masked. It will be pandemic driven, it will be wave number 6 driven, etc. But I think in between the waves, there will be quite a lot of needless consumption. But because our government is a pro-business government, I expect that they will try and balance between the two interests.
And what do you fear will actually happen?
I fear that their main interest will be the election and not the economy.
So, a bunch of printing?
Well, no, but I think what the government could do is look squarely at that which gives them political mileage. It could be printing, it could be other things as well, it could be violence.
That's rather dark. Your hopes, sir?
My hope is that this thing runs its course quite quickly. So,
which thing?
It's 24
the
months.
Economy.
It's 12 months.
That's the economy. So when you look at how adamant government is in their exchange policy, when you look at what's happening with our taxes, when you look at everything, monetary, fiscal.
So you hope they'll come to their senses?
There'll be an epiphany.
I
then
don't.
They just move to free market
I'm
capitalism.
saying I hope that the auction, what we know about the auction is it will come to a head, right? So what I'm hoping for is that this is not a long drawn thing that gets us into 2023, but that it happens earlier on. Because when it happens earlier on, then we can restart again.
Okay. And what do you expect will actually happen?
What I expect will happen is that it will be long drawn. So they
2024.
They will. I think only after the elections. So they will draw it out as much as they can. So if they can increase our taxes, they will increase our taxes. If they can use inflation, they will. If they can exchange, nationalize, if you're an exporter and you have a problem with the
so you have a really dark.
And what do you
know?
2020.
Okay, see, this is a problem I
what
have.
do you? Okay.
Don't put.
What
you just said the
I
same
said
to
it's
me.
drawn out.
What do
You
you
just said the
fear
same
will
to
actually
me.
happen?
Sorry.
Oh, is this your optimistic scenario?
No, that's his.
No, my most optimistic scenario. You haven't been listening.
Okay.
My optimistic
Okay,
scenario
ignore him.
is that this thing comes to head early on,
And your
right? And then we restart again.
And your medium term scenario is
Your
Medium
dark scenario. What's your dark
is
scenario?
it will actually be drawn out until 2023, immediately after 2023.
and your fear.
My fear is it will be drawn out until 2030.
Oh, Jesus.
So it's going to get worse.
Yeah.
Before it gets better.
Yeah.
So
Okay,
maybe that's a very
that
dark
sounds like
place
everything.
for us to pause.
It will get worse before it gets better.
But
Compliments of the season.
strangely,
All the best for
we're
2020.
actually going to wish you a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.
Yes.
On
Yes,
that very
I am.
Here,
dark and depressing note.
here. Happy New Year.
But
Merry
it's been
Christmas.
good having you along
Good
for the last
tidings.
6 months.
Am I allowed to invade the set?
Yes, you may invade the set.
The production
George.
manager.
Yes.
Are we going to sing? No, we're not going to sing.
No, we're not going to sing.
See, these guys are drunk now. This is what happens.
No, we're happy.
We wish you a Merry Christmas. It's been great having you along. It's been a good 6 months. And we look forward to a great 2022 with you. As usual, COVID is real. Be safe, especially during this festive season. Be good. If you can't be good,
Be good
be
at
good
it.
at it.